All right, hi everyone. Welcome to ZTV. It is Wednesday. I am Grace, your host for the evening, and I'm going to be speaking with Peter Crouch. He is an associate broker with McInerney Associates. He has tons of local experience, and he's going to share his tips for buyers, his tips for sellers, and we're going to learn all about downsizing. So let me welcome Peter.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, of course.
I'll do a little more intro and then we can kind of get into some things. So I've been a local real estate broker for 25 plus years. A broker is simply a real estate agent who has more training in the next level of licensing from the state of Virginia. So I've had my own company for a while and then realized that I shouldn't be doing the tech. So I joined McInerney Associates about 8 years ago, and they're fantastic. They're the best top real estate company in the area. I don't think anybody would argue that they've got the highest standards, across the whole company. No part-time folks; they're all full-time, experienced people. So there's my McInerney plug. Today is a particularly difficult market for actually both buyers and sellers. And I say sellers, it's great to be a seller, but most sellers also then are buyers. So you kind of have to be really careful about how you approach that. Right now, if you're a buyer, a lot of folks out there, I think people think it began with the pandemic, but the heavy buying pressure actually started a few years ago, and we've had what we call a low inventory market. There haven't been, excuse me, as many homes on the market for purchasers as there have been in, let's say, 5 years ago, or in years past, let's call it. So I think the lack of inventory, if you think of real estate as an inventory business, are there enough houses on the shelves for the purchasers who are looking for them? The answer has been no for a while, and it's just gotten worse. Over the pandemic, it became worse. But what's really, really driving things now, as we're easing out of the pandemic, is that the interest rates are just so phenomenal. When you can get an interest rate at or below 3% for a 30-year fixed rate loan, why wouldn't you purchase something? Why wouldn't you try? Even if it didn't work out and you became frustrated with the process, you've got to try. So that's what I think is happening right now with buyers. A quick kind of note again on how long I've been, let's not call it how long I've been doing, how much experience I have. How about that? Is that right now I'm working with several younger couples who are the children of some of my original purchasers. So that speaks to experience, but also I think the parents know that the kids can trust my experience, and so that's kind of good. I may not speak millennial, but they understand, and I think they feel protected throughout the process. But it is frustrating. We just were finally successful this week on an offer for a young couple on a townhouse in Springfield, and it was our 8th offer. So I think we had to go through some of those early 8 offers simply because that's kind of teaching them more about the market and how difficult it is. So I think that was a fruitful exercise for them. I think they feel like it was good. And over time, we realized what it was going to take to get the right house. And when the right house, the 8th one, came up, we were ready to really position ourselves well for that house. Other than an experienced real estate person, I think the biggest thing a buyer can do these days for themselves is to get a strong local lender. I don't want to put down any of the national brands, the big national lenders who are especially tech heavy. But when a seller meets with their real estate person to review multiple offers, the absolute best thing to have is a letter from a local lender who has pulled the credit, done the underwriting, and can be reached. If you call some of these national lenders let me turn around. If I'm in the shoes of a seller and an agent who's representing the seller, which I do as well, but when I'm in those shoes, I'm going to call the lender on any offer we receive and really kind of grill them as much as I can. If I have to call Oregon or I have to call a switchboard who then just patches me to somebody who's on duty. Doesn't work. So you really, the best thing is to have a strong local lender. And I'm going to do a quick shout out to, I think the best guy in the area, Pat Holland of Embrace Home Loans. They don't advertise a lot. Pat is the best guy around. It's P Holland at Embrace Home Loans. Tip top. There have been a number of purchases that we've gotten through this year because Pat is well known in the industry and just tip top, and you can answer any question a seller or seller's agent could throw at him. So that's my biggest tip for a buyer is use the best lender you can find. Make sure they're knowledgeable. Make sure they're local to the best of your ability. Doesn't always work, but try if you can to use local. We've been buying local for so long, or that's been such a theme. It should be with your lender also. And then have patience. This is not, the buying process evolves. So you have to have patience, and you learn each time you look at a house or each time you make an offer that may or may not be successful. Okay. Every seller these days, I say every, most sellers these days are also buyers. So there are some tricks, and not some tricks, but so there are some strategies and techniques to make sure that somebody who's selling a home and looking to purchase another home has the best chance of getting that second home. So I would say the first thing that happens in today's market is almost all sellers will refuse to consider an offer from a buyer that is contingent on that buyer selling a property. Makes it kind of tough, but tough to do both buy and sell. But if a seller has two offers, and the first one is, let's say it's cash, or it's just clean and a good down payment and a strong lender letter, and then they have another one, could even be more money, but that buyer has to wait or make the seller wait to before the buyer can sell a home that they have or that they own currently. If they have to sell that home before they can complete the purchase of the seller's home, sellers will not accept that. So you have to be non-contingent is the real estate term for that, and that takes some doing sometimes. Sometimes it's if you haven't sold your townhouse yet to be able to buy the single family, how am I going to make a non-contingent offer? There are strategies. Sometimes the lenders can make it work. Sometimes we can do some other things that will kind of dovetail in that scenario. But I would say that's one of the bigger issues right now for buyers and sellers, because they're also going to be buyers. We just had some folks who we went through all the options before we put their house on the market for sale, and we would hope to get what's called a rent back. Settle on their home, free up their money, but they didn't have to move out. It's called a rent back. They don't have to move out for 30 days or 60 days. 60 is the maximum. But their best buyer couldn't allow that because they had to be out of their house at a particular time. So we found temporary housing, and even paying a little premium for temporary housing made that the best offer. So we took it, and they're in temporary housing, but it freed up their cash, and now they're under contract on the purchase of their next home up in Philadelphia, by the way. We connected them with a company up there where they were being transferred. So I think the biggest thing is plan. If you're a seller, plan the next house strategy. It's not just about getting out of this one; it's getting into the next one. And whether, let's say you're not going into the next one, that saves that issue, but there are still planning things to take care of when you're going to sell a property.
And so these strategies, these tips that you're giving, I want to know if these tips are consistent as the market fluctuates, or are you going to adjust your strategy as the market fluctuates, or if you're buying or selling not necessarily in Alexandria, if you're in a different part of the country like Philadelphia?
I think they're somewhat universal. So right now, the whole country seems to be on this low inventory scenario, so that the buyers it's harder to be a buyer than it is to be a seller. But I gave that some thought the other day too. And let's say you want to make an offer to a seller. Let's say it's a slow market for sellers, and the buyer has the upper hand. You still want to position yourself to make it the absolute most attractive to a seller. Because let's say you want to offer, a chunk below their list price. If all the other terms, the seller can check that they're good for them, then the seller would potentially consider a lower price. So I think they're kind of timeless and universal in terms of those strategies of presenting your best offer, whether you're a buyer or a seller.
And so you have 25 years experience locally, and you've obviously put these strategies to the test, and they obviously work. And I want to know if you've always been local to Alexandria as a realtor, or if you have had experience selling outside of the area.
I have always been local. My parents moved here when I was in college, and then they left to go back home. Dad was military. Home is Connecticut. But I stayed here. I've always been a real estate broker here, but I do a little bit in Connecticut. And the other great thing about McInerney and what I do is that we can connect people with real estate specialists around the country. McInerney has a network. I have a network of senior specialists, because that's one of my specialties. And I can, so for example, these folks in Philadelphia, we put them together. They weren't seniors, but we put a senior together with somebody in Oregon not long ago, because that's where their adult children and grandchildren were. So locally, yes. Nationally, yes.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to talk about your specialty for a little bit. I want to talk about real estate for seniors. What does that look like? Walk us through all the facets to consider if you're a senior, and maybe you're looking to downsize, maybe you're looking to move in with other family members. Just tell us what you got.
Okay. So as a senior or somebody, I kind of think of the senior market, and this is not really, seniors, because as soon as somebody is an empty nester, you're not a senior, but things change. Do you then need that, 4 or 5 bedroom house with the 3.5 bathrooms and all of that? A lot of people stay there. They stay there in those homes at least for a couple of years, because the kids are coming back, and it seems like as soon as grandchildren come into the picture, the parents, the older generation, start going there for Christmas instead of the kids coming home for Christmas. So a few years after people become an empty nester, they tend to think about possibly moving. So that's what I have actually done. My family and I did that. Number one, because it's my specialty, I kind of figured I better go through it. But also, so as we were starting this show, I was telling you about my lawnmower incident, and what that was is that at the single family home, after the kids had left, a friend came over and said, "You want to go fishing?" I said, "No, I'm mowing the lawn." And he said, "Okay, I'm going. Which would you rather do, mow the lawn or go fishing?" Okay,
I think most people would know the answer to that. I think most people would agree with the answer to that.
So, I don't own a lawnmower anymore. I tried to do those other things that I didn't have time to do when the kids were growing, or when other things were entering people's lives and doing that kind of thing. So I think it's a good thing, and I have done it. We have done it. It was easy for me because we owned a townhouse in Kingstown. Tenant was moving. We moved from the single family right into the townhouse. I didn't have to do the timing of selling and buying. So that was easy, but it was still not an easy process. So one of the slides I sent you was a little kind of a sequence of things that you can do to prepare to move. That's it right there. Everybody, regardless of age, if they're going to move to smaller quarters, kind of follows this process. They figure out what they want to keep. It says family, that really means give to family or friends, give things that you might want to give away. Ask your kids if they want anything, and they'll tell you no, so that's good. You may have some heirlooms that you want to sell, or if you've got 5 bedrooms and you're going down to 3, and maybe there's a bedroom suite to sell. And then you typically donate and discard whatever's broken or isn't donatable. And so again, I think regardless of age and stage of life that you're in, that's a sequence for emptying a house. I think it even applies if you're going to a bigger house. You're still going to want to throw some things away, donate some things, and do that. But that sequence really starts well before the real estate part. People think of the real estate part as, putting in a coat of paint or getting into appliance and things like that. It starts way before that. And as folks remain in their house for longer periods of time, so let me back up. I downsized after only 17 years in the house. There are lots of folks who are 40 years in their home, 50. I'm helping a couple right now who've been in their house 60 years, and have way outgrown it. They're in their 90s. The house is just, it's mind-boggling. But that process is going to be the same. I think the kind of the next thing that happens is that people say, oh my gosh, that's overwhelming. The process of going through all of that is overwhelming. And the good news is that there are a lot of folks in our area who help with different stages of that process. For example, we use oftentimes a couple of different decluttering companies, and they'll go and help someone kind of walk through a room and make those 5 decisions. You've got those 5 decisions on what to do with anything you touch, keep, give, sell, etc. And there are people who will help you do that, and one of my favorites is Karen from Simplify for Life, and it's Karen at Simplify for Life, Karen Gardner. She works with a lot of folks from At Home in Alexandria, a lot of seniors who are downsizing and are going to some of our senior communities. And she'll go room by room, and they typically break it into bite-sized pieces, so it's a lot more manageable than just looking at that book and saying, I got to do that to everything in my house. There are also folks who can help identify if there are things of value that can be sold. Oftentimes these days you're taking a picture of an heirloom or something and sending it off to Weschler's Gallery or Potomac Company up in North Old Town, and they can tell you whether something's got some value and how to go about selling something. If family wants things, and that's actually kind of rare these days, my favorite is to tell them that if they really want it, they come get it. There's no sense in you shipping it around. So they want it, they come get it. Otherwise, it goes into the donate category. Lots of donation companies shut down over the pandemic, but most of them are back open again and will receive donations. A lot of them will pick them up, but sometimes you have to box them and take them and drop them off to a donation center. And then there are people who will help pick up the trash, help remove anything that you don't want that might be broken and things like that. A couple of my favorites are Kyle at Reliable Hauling. He will haul and donate. He's the one that comes to the top of mind right away. So the next part of moving is actually the move itself. And there is a whole industry called move managing. The National Association of Senior Move Managers is a group of folks who specialize in senior and specialty moves that can help people really kind of think through their move. And they can handle things from just helping to plan the next space to all the way to actually moving. And in the morning, you leave your old house with your dresser with its things on top. And in the afternoon, you come to the new place with your dresser in place and the same things on top. So it minimizes the stress of moving and all the different steps in between. The first thing I think a lot of older folks these days, including myself, because the good thing is I already knew the townhouse I was moving into, but I think you've got a floor plan there. The best thing you can do from a seller's perspective is if you can figure out where you're headed next and get a floor plan, you can then decide much more easily on the pieces of furnishings and things that you want to keep, even all the way down to the hangings on the wall. But this is a 2-bedroom. I can't remember which community it is. Probably says on there. It's one of our local senior communities, and it basically, if you look at that floor plan, it'll tell you exactly what you can bring. Are pretty darn close. A senior move manager, or even some of the decluttering folks, will help you figure out what to keep and how things work best if you can get your hands on a floor plan of where you're headed. So I'm a strong believer in floor plans. If you're going smaller, they'll help with all of those decisions. I think that's a key ingredient.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, again, like your tips for buyers and sellers, that all of those 5 points on the Post-it are pertinent to anyone who is downsizing or upgrading or, whatever. But I think you have personal experience with downsizing, and so you understand exactly how pertinent those 5 points are, and they help, and they are easily doable. And speaking of downsizing and your experience with it, you received a National Outstanding Service Award from the National Association of Realtors. So tell us a little bit about this award and what it meant to receive it.
I'm not a award type of a person, but I volunteer locally for 3 different organizations. At Home in Alexandria, which is a senior village. If someone's not familiar with senior villages, just Google senior village. It's they're all nonprofit groups that are in hundreds of places around the country, and their goal is to help people remain in their homes, give them the support, the social engagement, emergency help when needed. And it's been really critical this past year with everybody kind of stuck at home. People can engage online, and we did a lot of meal deliveries and things like that. So At Home in Alexandria is our Alexandria Senior Village. Mount Vernon at Home is down the Parkway a little bit, and then Senior Services of Alexandria. So I think because of the volunteering, somebody put me in for that, and there it was. But that was it was great because it was 2 real estate people that year. It was 2018 who were nominated and won the award out of 1.4 million realtors across the country, and actually only about 2% have the designation called Senior Real Estate Specialist, SRES. So if you see SRES after someone's name, Seniors Real Estate Specialist. I guess I could be a senior real estate person, which I guess I am, but it's really for seniors and specialty in that area. So it's really for handling, it's for volunteering and for handling a senior move in the way we've talked, all the preparation. Some of our seniors, it's 3 years in the planning. That's the lengthy one, but sometimes it's shorter. And unfortunately, if there's an illness or an accident, it can be immediate. And that's why I think a lot of people need to plan, even if they're not ready to execute right away, if they're not ready to move, but if they've planned it in the event of an emergency, that can help. We had somebody not long ago where there was one spouse was ill, and then the other spouse passed away. The caregiver passed away. So all of a sudden, the ill spouse who needed care was on her own. So that makes it tough. So I would encourage everybody to kind of do that planning process, and that just starts with family and advisors, financial advisors, but it also then includes the real estate aspect. Sometimes it's a home modification. Sometimes it's a preparation to move to a 1 level. Moving to 1 level is probably the biggest issue these days. More and more people are falling, and that sounds weird. Why would more and more people fall? But we see falls as the biggest issue with people staying in their homes. And so, these two groups, At Home in Alexandria and Mount Vernon Home, and actually SSA as well, Senior Services, all help kind of help people stay in their homes by making sure their environment is safe and their house is safe, and they've got the latest safety features in their home. We've got a publication from AARP that's called the Home Fit Guide, and it's a here are the top 5 or 6 things that AARP recommends you do to your home to make it last you longer. How about that? So I think that award was for that, but that's something we do too. Why would I volunteer with an agency who's trying to keep people in their homes? I'm a real estate broker. Shouldn't I be helping them get out of their homes? Well, the bottom line is trust and keeping them in their homes. And eventually there's going to be a need. And if they trust somebody, then that makes their transition, whatever that transition is, a lot easier. So I think that's one of those. And I learned that from working with my parents when they were going through illnesses and things like that. But quickly, also, I wanted to talk to sellers. So there are a number of older folks who hold off selling their home because they haven't done any updates, or something's broken, or they've not been able to maintain things over the years. They don't need to, so they don't need to worry about that. I would say that if they really feel pressure to move, they need to go ahead and prepare. These days, it's relatively easy to prepare a home for sale, and you can sell it in my view, one of 3 ways. The first one I don't recommend. First one is totally as is. That's where you call the number that you see on the TV in the morning that says, we'll buy your home quick for cash in 7 days, and you can move and leave all your trash and disposables in there. Worst deal out there, because that's a company who's trying to take your equity. I say take your equity, they're legitimate companies, but it's your equity, and with a little bit of work, you can get a much higher price. The flippers who are looking for those are probably looking for 50 to 60% of what the full market value could be if you did a bunch of work. That's number one. Second one is a house can be clean and empty. Clean, empty, and things not broken. That's the best way for a lot of folks to sell their homes, and it's the easiest way to get it prepared, simply because the haulers can take everything out. A quick coat of paint makes virtually everything look clean. Don't need to upgrade everything. Clean, empty, nothing broken is a recipe for a solid sale of your home, and easy to accomplish, both from financial and the time perspective. On the top end of the scale is get your house totally renovated. All of today's bells and whistles, brand new kitchen, brand new bathrooms, and things like that. If you're fortunate to have been able to keep a house up like that, wonderful. But you don't have to go there to have a good, solid sale. In fact, in most places, most situations, if you wanted to take your home that doesn't have a new kitchen, put in a new kitchen just to sell it, you might break even, you might not. So this is an example of someone who was selling a house that was an older kitchen. First thing we did was attack the wallpaper. But this is that same wall, and all we did was paint the cabinets and put in an inexpensive, but granite, but very good granite countertop. Paint the walls, paint the cabinets, granite countertop. That house, we priced it at the top of where we thought it was going to be, and it went $70,000 higher after the 13th offer. So it was inexpensive to get that prepared. And I would encourage a lot of people to at least consider doing those kinds of things to a house. Here's another one. This is actually in the state. The dining room, the family had kind of put everything in this great room, and that's a dining room hutch in the middle there. But then again, it was carpet and paint. We did some staging with some things that were left in the house, but it was carpet and paint, and that sold the house. So there are a lot of things you can do for not a lot of money. And maybe if something really is glaring or broken, maybe you fix it, or replace a bathroom countertop, or make one part of the house really spiffy and the other one's clean, not broken, and freshly painted, and you're good to go. So I would say the fear of my house isn't going to show well shouldn't keep anybody from taking that next step if they feel like they've got to get to one level, or they've got to go to an apartment, or they want to retire to, or not retire, but they need to go near the kids and grandkids. That should not ever hold anybody back.
No, of course not. And so these steps, like you're saying, they are relatively simple when it comes to selling your house and trying to upgrade the value of it. And so these steps are things people can learn from brokers like you. Can they also learn them at seminars, like a downsizing seminar? I know you have one coming up at Home in Alexandria and Mount Vernon at Home.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. We on the workshop, we're actually going to have all these different people: the declutterer, the move manager. I don't think the rubbish guy, the trash guy, is going to be there, but myself, and we're going to go through all these topics. And I would say also that there are ways to get those few improvements done. Even if we're just doing painting and maybe putting a countertop on, that's not a lot of money, but a lot of these vendors, the people that we use, and we have the great contractors to do it all, so you're not on your own. In fact, that one of those last ones, I totally managed all the contractors in the estate because the kids weren't local. So we got all the contractors in. Some of them held their bills. There are ways to have those kinds of improvements paid out of the sale as opposed to having to front cash. So it just depends on what's needed and the scope of work. But there are local contractors who are very good, who are willing to hold some funds, and even a couple of companies that will do a whole remodel and hold their funds, or not need their funds until settled. So it really, there's no reason not to do some preparation.
Yeah, no, of course. And so all of these resources can be found at a seminar. They'll all be in one place. The upcoming one for At Home in Alexandria and Mount Vernon at Home is June 25th from 10 to 11:30. Yep, so Peter will be there. A bunch of other resources will be there. So if you're interested in learning more about downsizing, that is something to look up. Peter, where can people go to either register or find more information about that?
I don't have it, there's no address yet, or Zoom address or anything for that yet, but I would go to the so athomeinalexandria.org or mountvernonathome.org. And it'll be on my contact information as well. But there'll be a lot of resources there, and I would encourage people to look up At Home in Alexandria and Mount Vernon at Home. They're just great organizations. I think if you felt isolated this last year as an older person, man, oh man, they've got all sorts of things for you to participate in. I just think they're phenomenal.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And we are going to be wrapping up here soon because we have some more candidate interviews with Virginia Amos at 8 o'clock tonight. But Peter, if there is like one final piece of advice that you want to leave us with tonight, let everyone know.
I would say don't go it alone. There are lots of resources, no matter whether you're a buyer or a seller, a senior seller. There are just tons of resources. Just reach out.
Wonderful. Great. Perfect advice. Easy to follow. Peter, thank you so much for being here tonight and taking the time to speak with me and just give us all of your wonderful wisdom about the real estate world.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it very much.
All right, guys, that does it for tonight. Like I said, 8 o'clock, we have some more candidate interviews with Virginia Amos. And tomorrow, I am sorry, I realized yesterday I misspoke about tomorrow's show. I actually meant to say that tomorrow is Trash or Treasure. So tune in. We haven't had one of those in a while, so it should be exciting. And as always, 7 o'clock on our Facebook Live. Until then, be the good news in someone's life.